Hello, I'm back. Welcome back to the Astrology live stream. My name is Nick Dagan Best. If you folks were hoping for a stream yesterday, sorry about that. Watson and I were both really swamped in work and just last minute decision essentially to forgo it for the week. But we will be back for the team stream next Sunday, so do join us for that. I hope you guys have been doing well. I thought today, of course, Mars has just gone into Scorpio, and we're only about a week away or so from the Sun entering Scorpio, at which point we will have the Sun and Mars heading towards a conjunction in Scorpio in mid-November. And I thought I would talk a bit about Sun-Mars conjunctions, generally speaking, Mars more broadly, and the Sun-Mars conjunction in Scorpio most specifically, because it has been a while since we've had it. So I've been working on some slideshows for videos. I'm getting closer and closer to releasing some videos. I know you folks have been hearing me talk for about 10 months about putting out my next sort of video essay, and it's coming along nicely. I've made a lot of progress. So I'm just going to put up a slideshow with some thoughts about Sun Mars, some observations, and yeah, we'll take it from there. All right. Just give me a moment here. Oh, already seeing the comments. I missed them for a sec. B. Havens wants brunch and a mimosa when I go live. Do I have a source for Saros cycle meanings? No, I don't have a source for Saros cycle meanings. That's a good question. I'd love to know any astrologer who's studied the Saros cycles, historically over centuries and worked out their kind of meanings. That's definitely something that's worth doing. Chris and I are actually right now putting together an episode for the Astrology podcast on eclipses. So thank you, Maureen. That's sort of a timely question. That's one of the things that was taking my time yesterday, apart from working on slides. Yeah, Bernadette Brady, Eagle and the Lark, does, that's probably about as good as you're going to get. Her book on fixed stars is also quite good. All right, there you go. That book didn't occur to me right off the top of my head, but yeah, Bernadette Brady is one of the veterans, one of the only living authors who's written about the fixed stars. We do have some older books. All right, cool. All right, everyone's chiming in with Bernadette. All right, very good. Okay, with that in mind, Chris and I are going to be well, I'm helping him with the episode. I may or may not be on the Astrology podcast episode, but I do that sometimes. I work with him behind the scenes to develop material for the podcast. So that's something we're doing now. Some of my time twin material was used in Kepler class this week. I think I had used Saturn in Scorpio. Yeah, that was probably Miles Davis, Marilyn Monroe, and Allen Ginsberg. That is a triple time twin work that I do to look at Mars, Saturn, and Venus, because the three of them were born within a week of each other. And yet they're three very sort of distinguished individuals, very different from each other, and yet sort of artistic leaders. Yeah, okay, so Chelsea says that's what you were learning. Well, that's cool. I'm glad someone was... that's an old video I put out. I want to do an update of it. Gosh, I probably put that video out in 2012. Yeah, I think it was, because I'd spoken at UAC about them. And so it's probably from a video I made from a talk I did at UAC. Solar arcs and how I use them. What is their significance and how do I use them alongside other timing techniques? 9 years old, Chelsea says, okay. Russell Brand and Angelina Jolie are time twins, right? Yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there. My only problem with using Brand and Jolie is they're still quite young and alive. And I like to use like entire lifetimes, and or at least, either people who live to be old, or at least people, if they died young, have very well documented lives. Brandon Jolie to some extent, but I find actors harder. unless, like Marilyn Monroe was an actor, obviously, but she's been dead for 60 years, and many, many, many books have been written about her life that document, her rise to fame, her years as a starlet, and all that. So there's a lot to work with there. Someday I'm sure Angelina Jolie will die and someone will write a book this thick. Well, if they still publish books or what have you about her life, and then that'll make her a much more suitable subject for astrology study. I mean, sure, she's a celebrity, and we find out these little bits and bobs about her adopting children or about her relationships and marriages, but it's not as substantial as when someone's gone. So when I really invest time in studying time twins, um, yeah, it's really useful to be able to use like someone's entire lifetime, not just like that thing they're famous for or that year they shot to fame, but you really want to get a sense of the whole corpus of a lifetime. So that's what I do with that. Now, just to quickly get to Bliss 2B's question about solar arcs before I move on to the Sun Mars, like I wanted to talk about. It's been a long time since I've used solar arcs at all. Not that I sort of decided that they didn't use, but there's some overlap between solar arcs and secondary progressions. Basically, that's what solar arcs are, is you take that day for a year progression of the sun, you take that arc and you apply it to all the planets. That's really all you do. So you're taking the progressed sun, like let's say you're 20 years old, and so the progressed sun is 20 zodiacal degrees after your natal solar degree. Well, then you're just going to take that same 20 degrees and then apply it to all the planets in your chart and the angles, and look for them to sort of meet other bodies in a sort of connection with other bodies in the nativity, or if you're getting really fancy and using dials, looking for solar arcs that come within 90 degrees or 45 and a half degrees of each other. I do think of them as being more useful in a sort of cosmobiological sense. If you guys know about midpoints and using dials, this is work that I was studying, very keen on in my early years. And I never, again, it's something else. I didn't drop it because it wasn't working for me, but I just sort of, found synodic cycles, found the stuff that really worked for me, both as a researcher and also just as a consulting astrologer. I mean, you only have 1 hour with a client, or at least 1 hour at a time, and I can't throw the entire kitchen sink at what they're doing. And so I've sort of stratified what I do in client work, and it doesn't really involve solar arcs or dials or midpoints, although that's intriguing material to study, and it certainly can be used by an astrologer in consultation. It's not like I look askance at that kind of work. But yeah, to make a short answer long, Bliss, I really prefer secondary progressions because every planet goes by its own rhythm, and they speed up, they slow down, they make stations, which are very impactful in secondary progressions, and which can't happen in solar arcs. The things that I really love most about secondary progressions, solar arcs just kind of filter all those out, and you're just looking at degree arcs, which is interesting in and of itself. And I've certainly seen some interesting results over the years. But it ultimately didn't sort of stick with me the way some other things did. So I hope that answers your question. All right, I'm gonna move into this Sun Mars stuff now, and then as usual, because I'm not like Watson and I don't have a bunch of different screens, I'm working off of one laptop. So, all right, this is my little intro video here. I'm going to take that Mars label out. Okay. And let's just, what's going on here? Why am I not? There we are. Whoops. All right. Things were moving too slow and then too quickly. Right. So first, I just want to point out that the orbits of the planets around the sun are not perfect circles, but rather they're ellipses. There are points in the orbit where the bodies are closer to the sun and points in the orbit where they're furthest. Whoops. Earth's orbit has an aphelion and a perihelion. Aphelion, which happens in July for planet Earth, around July 4th, is the point of the Earth orbit that is farthest away from the sun. It always happens in early July, about 2 weeks after the June solstice. And then perihelion, the counterpart, is the point of the Earth's orbit that is nearest to the sun. This always happens in early January, about 2 weeks after the December solstice. Yeah, it's more or less the 4th or the 5th of the month, usually, where these happen year to year. Now, this is part of the reason. I know I've sort of covered this part before, but if you've heard me say it before, just bear with me, because I'm going somewhere with this, and I do have some new things to show. But the reason that February has, the reason February has 28 days, whereas July and August have 31 days each, accounts for this. That's how we make up in our calendar for the sort of the shift that you get between the perihelion and the aphelion. Because from a geocentric perspective, the Earth appears, or rather the sun appears to be transiting at a slower speed than it does in July when it's at its perihelion. And this kind of makes sense because it's as we're rounding around the aphelion, it's a greater sort of travel distance to get around the sun and a shorter one at the perihelion. So of course, February is a short month and July and August are longer months. So I hope you follow me that much. All right. Now moving on to Mars. Mars has the second most elliptical orbit of the solar system's planets, the first being Mercury. In comparison, Earth's orbit seems almost circular. The synodic cycle of Mars combines alternating sums of 15 and 17, arriving at a close zodiacal return at 79. So this is important. You have your first Mars return at 15. Then 17 years later, you have your second Mars return at 32. And then 15 years later, you have your third Mars return at 47. And then 17 years later, you have your fourth Mars return at 64. And then finally, 15 years later, you have your fifth Mars return at 79. And at every successive 79-year interval, Mars transits about 4 to 5 zodiacal degrees earlier than at the previous 79-year interval. And I'll get to that in a moment. I'll explain that a little more closely. But just for the time being, what this diagram really shows you is that the sort of the severity of given planetary ellipses. Now you can see Mercury, which has the most extreme. You can see there's points where it's really, really close to the sun. And then at its furthest distance from the sun, geez, it looks like it's possibly 4, maybe even 5. I'm going to guess and say 4 times the distance as its closest. Venus is perfectly symmetrical, which accounts for the fact that its own, the synodic cycle viewed from Earth is also very symmetrical. But Venus really does seem to orbit the sun, certainly relative to all the other planets. Venus seems to orbit the sun in a circular orbit, apart from everything else. Now, Earth is here. Incidentally, these points, this is the this is the December solstice, this is the June solstice, this is the March equinox, and this is the September equinox. So you can see, like on this date here, the sun is probably in Aquarius, okay? Because that's where the Earth being here is telling me that if we're looking at a chart for this given moment, the sun in our chart would be in Aquarius. All the other planets you can't sort of, because they depend on the view from the Earth, but Earth's transit around here does tell us this stuff. So you can see that up here around the December solstice, just afterwards is where it's at its closest distance to the sun. Whereas if you go all the way down here at the opposite end, this being the June solstice, the greatest distance between Earth and the sun is down here. So you can see that. Now, with all this in mind, now look at Mars. Mars also has, like I said, the second most elliptical orbit after Mercury. So you can see Mercury's is very extreme. Mars is quite extreme as well, not as much as Mercury, which, like I said, looks like it's like 4 times further from its closest distance. But the other thing is Mars seems to be at its furthest distance from the sun during the same period that Earth is at its closest distance. Now here's a little sort of secret, shouldn't be too mystifying to you guys. Planetary retrogrades happen when the planet is closest to Earth. So you can see right here in this animation. Let's see, can I play with this? Yeah. So oh, okay. I thought this video was longer than that. Okay. Well, when the Earth and the sun are next to each other, that's when Mars is going to be retrograde. So what I'm getting at is during the periods, this period when Mars is at its furthest from the sun, it's going to take its longest distance to travel this part of, from our point of view, the ecliptic, as opposed to this point of view, which will happen faster. And because this is the part where the sun is in Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, this is where the Mars retrogrades in Cancer, Leo, and Virgo happen, because Mars will always be opposite the sun in a geocentric chart, when really it's not so much opposite the sun as it is conjunct the Earth, if you will. So with that in mind, it's just more common. Mars is because Mars is taking more time going through this part of the cycle. When the Earth is coincidental with Mars and it's making a retrograde, it happens a lot more frequently here and much less frequently here, because Mars is closer to the sun. It's moving faster, and so it's less likely to happen to have the sun and Mars coincidental in this part of the ecliptic, or as we're seeing the ecliptic. And so with this in mind, the Mars retrogrades and Sun-Mars conjunctions, Sun-Mars conjunctions being the flip side of the retrograde, when this Mars gets to be opposite the Earth, okay, this will be a Sun-Mars conjunction, which is what's coming up very soon. We're going to have the Earth will be about here in Scorpio. This is where Scorpio is. And Mars will be about here, which will look like it's in Scorpio conjunct the sun. So remember, that's the way you have to be able to sort of navigate the distinction between a geocentric perspective and a heliocentric perspective. And you need to sort of be able to understand both, and to sort of, go from one to the other, if you will. All right. So the Sun-Mars conjunction in Scorpio happens at a point in the Mars orbit where it's not at its greatest distance from the sun, but it's still quite a distance from the sun, say, from when it's closest. And as a result, Sun-Mars conjunctions in Scorpio do not happen very often, nor do Mars retrogrades in Scorpio. All right, so I'm just going to tell you some quick stuff about Mars. First of all, Mars stations retrograde approximately every 26 months for a duration of approximately 3 months. Mars has 7 retrograde phases in one 15-year cycle, stationing between 13 to 27 degrees short of a full zodiacal return. That's in just a 15-year return. Mars retrograde remains in one zodiac sign for about half a year. I'm sure all of you remember how 2022 was like half the year was Mars in Gemini. And 4, Mars consistently stations retrograde in Leo and Virgo every 15 to 17 years, but Mars retrogrades in the other 9 tropical signs can take up to 47 years to reoccur. It should say Cancer, Leo, and Virgo are the most consistent. All right. So now this is an outline of every Sun-Mars conjunction between 1861 and 2040. So you can even see on the middle of the far right panel, you can see the retrograde we're heading toward on November 18th, 2023 at 25 degrees Scorpio, 36 minutes, if you see that. So that's where we're heading. The last Sun Mars conjunction was in Libra back in on October 8th, 2021. So you can see how they happen about 26 months apart, just like the retrogrades. They happen about 26 months apart, 25 to 26 months. All right. Now, just to give you a sense, this is every Sun Mars conjunction in Aries since 1861 leading up to 2040. And you can see there are only 5. All right. There was one in 1902, one in 1934, one in 1981, one in 2013, and there will be one in 2028 at 1 degrees of Aries, which is interesting because, that's where the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to be about 2-3 years earlier, and that Sun Mars conjunction in Aries in 2028 will be some kind of astrological response to whatever that Saturn Neptune has to do about. So that's a little peek into the future. Now going on with this is what a Sun Mars conjunction in Aries looks like. So you can see, like I said, Earth at the very top there, because that is where oh, wait a minute. No, I've got these are slides before I fixed it. Okay, never mind. I've got to change that. I'm glad I remembered that. It was skewered. It did not, like the earlier image I showed you had Capricorn at the top and Aries on the left, but that was sort of, I have to redo these slides. That just reminds me. Okay, now Cancer. What's going on here? Wasn't it responding? Okay. Cancer, you can see, like I said, happens a lot more frequently. There have been 8, or is it 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There have been 8 Sun Mars conjunctions in Cancer, or the total between 1861 and 2040. You can see we had one in the year 2000, and we'll have one again in the year 2032. It usually doesn't skip. Once in a while, it will skip. That's what we've had so far. That's why the last Sun Mars conjunction in Cancer was only in 2000. There would have been one around 2015, but it occurred at 23 Gemini, or there could have been one in 2017, but it occurred at 4 Leo. So you can see how Cancer just kind of got squeezed out by the Gemini and Leo ones in 2015 and 2017. But there'll be another one in 2032. Okay, and that's another, that's a shame I didn't redo those images. I just haven't had time. That's why I had to skip the silly cast yesterday. All right, Sun Libra, it's a little more common. We have 10 Sun Mars conjunctions in Libra since 1861. We had one, of course, 2 years ago in 2021. There'll be one in 2036. And Scorpio, this is where we are now. Scorpio, there have been 9 Sun Mars retrogrades, or will be, between 1861 and 2040. There's, of course, the one we're having now in 2023. And then 15 years from now, we'll have one in the first decan of Scorpio at 8 degrees of Scorpio in the year 2038. So once in a while, they can occur 15 years apart, because this one is happening so late in Scorpio that 15 years later, you get one earlier in Scorpio. That's the way it sort of gradually recedes from sign to sign. But you can see, indeed, the last one prior to 2023 was in 1991, and before 1991 was 1959. So, like, if you're like me, you were born in the 1960s. I was born in 1968. So the Sun Mars conjunction in Scorpio that's coming up next month is only the second time, and I'm an old fart. I'm old as dirt. And yet I've only ever seen 2, or, provided I live to see next month, which hopefully I will. Once next month is over, I will have lived through 2 Sun Mars conjunctions in Scorpio in my super long, drawn out tragic lifetime. So that just gives you a sense of how these conjunctions wind up, especially in these rare signs. They wind up really marking these very special sort of events, astrological events in a given human lifetime. If you're someone who's got a lot of planets in Scorpio, or you've got a Scorpio ascendant, or what have you, all things being equal, the Sun Mars conjunction in a given sign tends to bonify that sign. Of course, I don't think, every Scorpio on planet Earth is going to enjoy the month of November. The world is in just too much turmoil for that to be true. But it is a general sort of astrological truism that for the sign, it tends to be a favorable experience. Right. So I'm just going to show a couple of more. Again, I'm sorry that these are not where they should be. those maps. I'm going to redo them for the proper video. But just to make my point, Sun Mars conjunctions in Aquarius, well, there've only been 4 since 1861. There was one in 1885, 1932, 1964, and 2011. So quite rare, and up to 47 years between them. Between 1964 and 2011, that was a 47-year gap, which is the longest gap you can have between them. And then you have something similar for Pisces, where there've only been 4 Sun-Mars conjunctions in Pisces since 1861, in 1870, in 1917, 1949, and 1996. It's only 3 in the 20th century, and I think we'll have our next one 47 years after 1996, which is in the year 2043. Just a little bit past my little map here. All right. And yeah, I do need to redo these maps. I'm sorry about that. Okay. So with that in mind, I will look at the okay. Primary progressions. Why does everyone suddenly want to know about progressions? Primary directions are also very interesting. They're a little more complicated to calculate. But yeah, there are books written about that. These are things that I studied 25 years ago or so, and sort of like got the concept, played with them a bit, and then as I said, I sort of refined myself using other techniques. So I'm rather rusty on primary directions, as it were. Michael Luton certainly swore by them. When I was studying with Michael Luton in the late 90s, he would always talk about how well they work. Okay, B Havens. Wait, Mars has a 2-year cycle. How is that 15 years? It's a 26-month cycle. It's 2 years and 2 months. So yeah, I know it is a little screwy the way it winds up being like this 15, 17 year thing. It's not perfectly 15 years, I mean, truth is it's like obviously immediate with alternating sums of 15 and 17, the real number, obviously the average number is 16, which is also 2 Venus cycles. But it's classic Mars that it winds up sort of disjointed in these and asymmetrical 15, 17, 15, 17, 15, 17. Of course, as I've pointed out before, the 32 and 64 are synodic Mars returns that also coincide with Venus synodic returns. And you get this is what I'm working on. I think I did show you guys my slideshow on Ali last week. And I was just going through the stuff that I'm going to be talking about in this video I'm working on. But Ali is a great case for how those joint synodic Venus and Mars returns can really play out in a chart like his, for instance, where you have both those planets in angles and aspect to each other and so forth. How close for a conjunction Sun Mars? Sibling was just shy of 2 degrees in Virgo. I consider that a conjunction. If they're both in the same sign and they're going to make the conjunction in that sign, that's close enough. There will be some instances, like say if there's going to be a Sun Mars conjunction in Sagittarius, or if there was one in Libra, both those planets, the Sun and Mars, can be co-present in Scorpio, even though the conjunction was in Libra or it's about to be in Sagittarius. Sometimes the two of them can move through Scorpio. And even in that instance, a co-presence speaks for itself. And obviously those happen a little more often than the actual conjunctions in that sign, but not that much more often. But yeah, the long and short of it is, certainly a 2-degree conjunction between Sun and Mars is what I will consider a conjunction for sure. In Virgo, yeah, I think we had one in 1972, and then we had one in 1989, 17 years later. So 1972, 1989 for the actual conjunction in Virgo. Anyway. Okay. So Kate says her son has a 2011 Aquarius stellium, 9th house, and that he wants to go to flight school. Yeah, Venus cycles are even, Mars is uneven. That's exactly the situation. So Kate, yeah, I have an Aries child born in 2011. She still has Venus in Aquarius conjunct Neptune, if you can believe it. Um, what a kid. Yeah, the 2011 generation is very, very interesting. 2011 did have that rare Sun Mars conjunction in Aquarius, the first one since 1964. Um, the 1964 conjunction gave us the likes of Sarah Palin, Chris Farley, some other people that I'm drawing a blank on. But you know, yeah, you get sort of different types. You also get, like, say, Michelle Obama has the Sun and Mars in Capricorn, I believe. She's born a month before that conjunction in Aquarius, but that's an instance I'm talking about. Sun Mars conjunctions in Capricorn are quite rare. There technically wasn't one in 1964, but because you had one in Aquarius, you did have Sun and Mars co-present in Capricorn in 1964. So you can think of Michelle Obama as one person around then. Um, Yeah, those 2011 people are pretty special, Kate. Well done. Maybe someday your son and my daughter will get married. Who knows? Um, what am I saying? I'm babbling. All right. Yeah, I wanted to get that Sun Mars material out there because it is important. That's where we're headed. And for those of you who have key Scorpio placements, it's worth sort of paying attention to what's going on there. As for someone having surgery, um, Scorpio sixth house, look, I mean, surgery is not pleasant, but we rarely get it done for no reason. I mean, I guess there's cosmetic surgery, but usually surgery means you're extending your lifetime. You will live longer because you're having surgery. Usually. Um, accidents happen, misfortune happens, but the reason we have the practice is because it does good. It saves lives or extends lives. I hope whoever's having Scorpio sixth house surgery in the coming month, that it's for the right reasons. All right. So with that in mind, it is a pretty busy day for me. I don't want to be on too long. I did want to talk to you guys about the Sun Mars thing that's coming up. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry I'm not going into a big lecture about primary directions, but I don't think I'm the best person right now. Like I said, I learned it over 20 years ago. Um, Best to speak to someone who's using the technique regularly to get their testimony as to how well it works. Solar arcs, I mean, I did use them for a while. I certainly studied them a lot more than I did primary direction. So I felt, and they're easy enough to explain. So I felt that was easy enough. Okay. Oh, all right, Kate. Cool. Yeah, I love those 2011 kids. Yeah, everyone's remarking on 2011. Yeah, 2011 was straight. It was the year of the Neptune ingress into Pisces, which of course coincided with Fukushima. It was a rough year for me. I was at that point 4 years in to this health crisis that would almost have me go homeless that year. It was ridiculous. And so 2011 went by and I spent most of it laid up in bed, barely able to move, no proper medical care, still waiting on a diagnosis that had taken at that point 4 years. In December of 2011, I'd be notified I had indeed tested positive for sleep apnea, and then I could actually be treated. So that was nearly 5 years of waiting just for the diagnosis. So yeah, I don't remember much of 2011. I studied astrology all through that time. I was a working astrologer, but I didn't have much strength, so I didn't, business wasn't very good. I didn't have much strength to promote myself. Life was a mess. So yeah, that's my 2011. But it certainly was a really, really eventful year. No question about that. All right. So yeah. Okay, Kai is saying, yeah, looking forward to my videos. Yeah, the videos do have some good astronomy in them, as you know, the stuff I was just showing covers some of that. Sorry for the slides that I still need to replace, but that's why I run through these things. I'm like, oh, I need to change this, so I need to change that. Chelsea saying, can I explain the theory of Mars is the if Mars is the Lord of the year post this conjunction and how it's protected from combustion? Yeah, it's I mean, you can't I think you just explained it, Chelsea. It's really as simple as that. When any planet is combust the sun, it does take back its significations when it's a time lord. For instance, when it's a perfected ruler of the year or something of that nature, then it does sort of take up its significations. Apart from that, the sun just tends to take on its signification. So it's not as you know unfortunate as some astrologers like to characterize it. And I'm someone who doesn't, you don't really want every single planet in your chart to be, super powerful. It just winds up being like an internal battle. There are people born in the autumn of 1963, or like September, October 1963, who'll have like 5 planets in dignity, and it's not like every single one of those people is a winner. You know what I mean? Plenty of losers in that bunch. It doesn't necessarily guarantee a successful life. What it does is it speaks to the contentment of the planet, the comfort of the planet, not necessarily the person. Any thoughts on recurring or predictable symbolic themes for Sun-Mars conjunctions? Not so much symbolic themes, but predictable. The thing they do make references to other transits. They sort of like, for instance, I pointed out in 2028 we're going to have a Sun Mars conjunction at 1 degree of Aries, and since there's going to be a Saturn Neptune conjunction at that degree in 2025 2026, that Mars in 2028 will be a thematic continuation of whatever that Saturn Neptune, or sort of a thematic response to whatever that Saturn Neptune would signify. The symbolic themes, they're too broad. I mean, sometimes you can put your finger on a few, but none are really occurring to me. But I think mostly in terms of predictable, look at where the Sun-Mars conjunctions happen relative to other, are they triggering an eclipse? Are they triggering like the degree of a recent eclipse? Are they triggering the degree of a recent outer planet conjunction, or a lunation? Anything like that? And that's where you want to, the symbolic theme will manifest in a very sort of specific way for a given individual. And I'm always more sort of interested in finding those. It can be useful to summarize things in a sort of in a little symbolic package, but then as soon as you do that, you find yourself sort of busting it open with exceptions and what have you. But yeah, I'm not thinking of anything off the head. The main thing is it gives you another marker in time that responds to other transits, or that sets the stage for following transits, and that's where you really see it coming to. I hope that helps, Real Darko Arts. That's what I consider the most important thing about observing those cycles. Okay, well, Mars can't be a morning or evening star. What it can, I mean, it's of the nocturnal sect. So the standard wisdom is that it's less malefic in nocturnal charts and more malefic in diurnal charts. And that largely really holds, with only a few exceptions. Excuse me. I had a client not too long ago. I forget the exact layout of the chart, but there was a square between Saturn and Mars. I'm going to blow this. I forget. Whatever the case was, Saturn and Mars were in a square between Capricorn and Libra, and I forget if the chart was diurnal but acted like a nocturnal, or the reverse. But it was one of these exceptions, but it was really like sort of marked out by the Mars Saturn configuration. Sorry, I'm being vague about that. I don't typically talk about clients' charts anyway. But apart from that, you get people who are born with the sun close to the horizon, like myself. I was born 20 minutes before sunrise. My chart is technically a nocturnal chart, but really it seems to function like a diurnal one in terms of how it responds to transits, in terms of how the zodiacal releasing works and what have you. These sect considerations and the way they work in terms of Saturn and Mars being, tougher or easier, if you will, or helpful and less helpful, I guess is the best way to put it. Largely consistent with the diurnal nocturnal doctrine, but there are exceptions, and you want to sort of look out for them. But very more often than not, it can be really useful to sort of determine, say in rectification. If this recently happened. I was doing rectification for a woman who's quite a bit older, like in her 70s, and I looked through all the sort of deaths that she had experienced over the course of her life, parents and family and friends and stuff like that, and the sort of the sad planets were always Jupiter and Saturn, and so I determined, okay, this must be a nocturnal chart most likely, because the Saturn and Jupiter transit seem to be like the really hard blows. Okay. Gets listed with the title. Kate, I don't think you'll ever hear Mars referred to as a morning star. Mercury and Venus can be morning or evening stars, because they precede Earth. They're between us and the sun, and so they can make heliacal risings, and well, I guess they all can, but yeah. There's either Venus and Mercury can only just like rise before the sun because they're so close to the sun, or they can set just after the sun, which is the evening star. Mars can be opposite the sun. Venus and Mercury cannot be opposite the sun. And therefore it can't be really an evening or morning star, but it is considered to be of the nocturnal sect, along with Venus and sometimes Mercury, if Mercury is an evening star. Real Darko Woods. My wife is also born at dawn. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what types of criteria you look for to determine which sex seems to be more appropriate. Yeah, like I was just saying, I look for, like, I get a chronology of the lifetime and what transits seem to be the shit disturbers, so to speak. Which ones seem to like bring grief, and which ones seem to be, like a diurnal chart. Someone will have Saturn conjunct the sun. It's like, oh yeah, my life was stressful because I got a promotion and I had to prove myself, but I did really well, and I got a raise because I worked hard. But yeah, sure, like the Saturn will still be in the story, but it wasn't like, my coworker was a drug addict and framed me for a theft, and I wound up in prison, or that's what can happen to a nocturnal chart with the wrong Saturn transit. Whereas the diurnal chart is more like, yeah, Saturn was hard, but it got me somewhere. I worked hard and proved myself. And vice versa, in terms of the severity of Mars for a nocturnal chart versus a diurnal. This is generally consistent, and you just want to sort of be able to look out for the exceptions. And then, when you find the exceptions, then it can, then you might want to reverse fortune and spirit in the chart. If you have like mine, even though I have a nocturnal chart, I wind up releasing from my spirit to fortune as if I were releasing from fortune to spirit, because it gives me the results that you should get from zodiacal releasing from spirit. It's quite kooky that way. Listed on synodic tables with AstroSeek. Okay, if the Mars cycle has morning on AstroSeek, that doesn't sound right. I don't know what I'm talking about. In the sect. Okay, the problem here, Kate, is you're using terms like morning star, which Mars cannot be, but Mars can be, in a diurnal chart or in a nocturnal chart, or it can be below the horizon or above the horizon. So some of this might just be terminology, and we're playing telephone. And Bliss2B says, I have my progressed lunar phase moving into a first quarter moon next month. Kind of excited about it, although it typically indicates a more stressful time. Okay. Yeah, progressed lunations are pretty intense. I had a progressed solar eclipse in September 2007, as there was an actual eclipse happening in the same sign in Virgo. And that was the beginning of my life coming apart with this health problem that lasted for, the next 7 years, really. So yeah, those progressed lunations can be powerful. I was just yesterday when Chris and I were researching the episode he's going to do on eclipses. I noticed that Barack Obama had a progressed solar eclipse when he was about 6 years old, and it happened to the month when his mother first took him to Indonesia. She had married an Indonesian man, and in October of 67, when he was 6 years old, the month he had a progressed solar eclipse, that was the month his mother took him on a plane and from Honolulu, made a brief stopover in Japan, and then went to Indonesia, where he would later be photographed wearing, quasi-Islamic garb, and it would be sort of the source of these rumors around him. Anyway, okay, I think I'm running out of steam. I think I've tackled your questions. You've been a wonderful audience. Okay, Laura says, I feel that Mars is actually one of the more stable planets in my chart, and I have a nocturnal chart. Yeah, that stands to reason. All right, cool. Well, this has been a fun one, folks. I'm sorry to be so brief. I hope it doesn't sort of turn you guys off, but yeah, I'm working on a lot of stuff. I'm working with Chris today some more, preparing that episode. I'm working on more slides for my videos. I have clients, of course. So, it's a busy time, but I do love these little sessions we have. I think it does me good to have these conversations with you guys. And I think I'm getting a little better at it. You've really indulged me, getting my wings and growing up through all this. There's nothing silly asking basic questions about the Mars cycle. There are no stupid questions. I hope I clarified stuff. I think there was just a little bit of misunderstanding between us because of terminology. B Havens, you're saying Mars conjunct data available. Are you talking about the slides I just put up? They'll be in a video and you can freeze frame them. I am considering making PDFs of all the slides I use for my videos and making those available to Patreon subscribers, because as I start producing videos, I'm going to be one of those irritating people who comes to you for Patreon subscriptions. Right now, I don't feel like I'm really earning them, so I'm not like, please support my Patreon. But the plan is to sort of produce videos regularly, and I could use the support if you're able to do it. All right, folks. So yeah, that's love hearing about Mars. Yeah, well, as we get closer to Sun Mars, I'm certainly likely to talk about it more. If you have, think of questions over the course of the week that you'd like to ask me about Mars, and I can always expand on it more next week. All right, folks, have yourselves a terrific week. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry again that we weren't able to entertain you yesterday, but Watson has sworn up and down that he'll be available next Sunday. So tune in next Sunday for the team stream with me and Patrick Watson. And of course, I'm here on Mondays, usually alone, sometimes with a friend. So yeah, come check me out. Of course, my name is Nick Dagan Best. My website is nickdaganbestastrologer.com. So if you're in the market for an astrology reading, do check me out. I'm not bad. And thank you all. Have yourselves a terrific week. And that's it from me.